Female karate black belt twin CEOs asked the black single dad veteran to spar, and what happened next shocked everyone in that room. The community center is silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. A lean black man in pale blue nurse's scrubs stands barefoot on a vinyl mat, his dark skin catching the harsh white glow from above. Across from him, two women in expensive athletic wear, identical down to the black belts cinched around their waists. Their arms are crossed. Their expressions say they've already won. Behind them, a crowd of donors and families, phones raised, recording. Everyone waiting to see the nurse embarrass himself. The man's hands hang loose at his sides. His face is calm. But his daughter, 10 years old, sitting front row, tears already streaming, knows something no one else in this room has figured out yet. One of the twins steps forward. She rolls her shoulders, adjusts her stance. Someone in the crowd whispers, "This is brutal." Another laughs nervously. The twin CEO smirks, plays to the cameras. "Ready?" she asks, not really asking. The man in scrubs closes his eyes for just a moment. One breath. When he opens them again, something has shifted. It's subtle, the angle of his chin, the way his weight settles, but a gray-haired veteran in the back row sees it. His mouth falls open. He stands suddenly, gripping the chair in front of him. "Wait," he starts to say, but it's already too late. The twin moves first, fast, confident. She throws a clean combination, textbook perfect, the kind of sequence that wins tournaments. The man doesn't block. He doesn't retreat. He just disappears from where he was and reappears somewhere else. What happens in the next 40 seconds will be replayed millions of times, analyzed frame by frame, argued over, dissected, because nobody in that room was ready for what a quiet man with kind eyes could do when he finally stopped hiding. If you believe that real strength doesn't need to announce itself, stay with this story, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. Before we begin, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated because of what people saw on the surface? But to understand how a nurse in scrubs became the most talked about fighter on the internet, we need to go back 3 weeks to a modest apartment on the south side of Chicago, where a man named David Harmon was trying very hard to stay invisible. David Harmon's day began the way it always did. Quiet, predictable, safe. He clocked in at the VA hospital at 6 in the morning, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as he pulled on his pale blue scrubs. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. His sneakers made no sound on the linoleum as he moved from room to room, checking charts, adjusting IV drips, speaking in low tones to men who'd seen things most people couldn't imagine. Doc was good at his job. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. When a 70-year-old vet named Marcus started shaking during a blood draw, Doc placed one hand on the man's shoulder and said, "You're all right. I got you." Marcus stopped shaking. The other nurses respected Doc. They didn't ask many questions. He'd worked there for 8 years and nobody knew much about him beyond the basics. He was reliable. He showed up early. He never complained. That was enough. By 3 in the afternoon, Doc was done. He changed out of his scrubs, pulled on a worn jacket, and headed out into the cold March air. The sky over Chicago's south side was gray and heavy. He walked 2 blocks to Zoe's school and waited by the fence with the other parents. When the doors opened, she came running. 10 years old, all energy and bright eyes, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Her brown skin glowed even under the dull sky. She had her mother's smile. "Hey, baby," Doc said. "Hey, Dad." They stopped at the corner store on the way home. The owner, Mr. Hassan, waved from behind the counter. "Doc, Zoe." "The usual?" "Yes, sir," Zoe said. Mr. Hassan handed her a small bag of chips and Doc a bottle of water. He waved off Doc's money. "Next time." It was the same exchange every week. Doc smiled and nodded. Some routines were worth keeping. Their apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a living room with a couch that sagged in the middle. The walls were thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing. But it was theirs. It was clean. It was home. Doc set his keys on the counter and pulled out Zoe's homework folder. Math tonight. Fractions. She groaned but sat down at the kitchen table without being asked. While she worked through the problems, she talked. She always talked. About her teacher, about a boy in her class who ate glue, about a book she was reading. Doc listened, nodding in the right places, correcting her math when she carried the wrong number. Then she said, "I want to try karate." Doc's pen stopped moving. He looked up. "Like Mom used to do," Zoe added. Her voice was softer now. Testing. Doc's chest tightened. He kept his face neutral. "Your mom did a lot of things, but she was good at karate. You said so. She was. So I want to try." Doc set the pen down. He wanted to say no. He wanted to say it was a bad idea. He wanted to tell her that some doors were better left closed. But then he looked at her face, the hope in her eyes, the way she was leaning forward just a little, waiting. "We'll see," he said. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. That night, after Zoe went to bed, Doc stood in the doorway of his closet. The footlocker sat in the back corner, dust gathering on the lid. He hadn't opened it in years, didn't need to. He knew what was inside: uniforms, medals, photographs, a life he didn't live anymore. He closed the closet door. In the kitchen, he poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. The apartment was silent now. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic outside. On the wall, in a simple black frame, was a photograph. A woman in marine dress blues. Staff Sergeant Malika Harmon. Dark skin, strong shoulders. A smile that could light up a room. She'd been gone 10 years. But some nights, it felt like yesterday. Doc stared at the photo for a long time. Then he set the glass down and went to bed. The next morning, Zoe left a pamphlet on the kitchen table. Youth Martial Arts Program for Military Families. Free classes. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Funded by something called Titan Tactical Solutions. She didn't say anything. Just looked at him while she ate her cereal. Doc picked up the pamphlet, read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in his pocket. "Okay," he said. Zoe's face lit up. "Really? Really?" She threw her arms around him. Doc closed his eyes and held her tight. That evening, after his shift, Doc watched Zoe practice basic stances in their small living room. She'd found videos online. Her form was terrible. Her balance was off. But she was trying. Pride swelled in his chest, and right behind it, pain. Because he could see Malika in every movement. The way Zoe tilted her chin, the way she set her feet, the way she refused to quit, even when she wobbled. Doc stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. His daughter didn't know what she was asking for, didn't know what this world could take from you. But she wanted it, and he couldn't tell her no. Not when she looked at him like that. Later, after Zoe was asleep, Doc stood alone in the kitchen again. The photo of Malika stared back at him. Her eyes were bright, alive, full of a future she never got to see. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," Doc whispered. The photograph didn't answer. But somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the grief and the guilt and the weight of 10 years of silence, something stirred. Something he thought he'd buried for good. And for the first time in a long time, David Harmon wondered if staying invisible was the same thing as staying safe. 1 week later, Doc stood in the doorway of the Northside Community Center and watched his daughter disappear into a world he'd left behind. The building was newer than he expected. Bright, clean. Glass doors, polished floors, walls painted in soft blues and grays. A banner hung above the entrance, Titan Tactical Solutions, supporting our military families. The logo was everywhere. On the walls, on the mats, on the water bottles stacked by the door. Corporate money had a certain smell to it. Fresh paint and new equipment. Doc signed Zoe in at the front desk and followed her into the main training room. 20 kids, ages 8 to 12, sat in neat rows on foam mats. Most wore white karate uniforms that still had the store creases. Zoe's was one of them. She glanced back at him once, nervous. Doc gave her a small nod. "You got this." The instructor was a younger guy, maybe mid-30s, with a high and tight haircut and the kind of posture that said military even before he opened his mouth. He introduced himself as Travis, Marine Corps veteran, second-degree black belt. His voice was calm and clear as he walked the kids through basic bows and stances. Doc took a seat in the back row. A few other parents scattered around the room, most of them scrolling through their phones. He sat with his hands folded, his back straight, watching. Travis was good, patient. He corrected a boy's stance without making him feel small. He showed a girl how to tighten her fist without lecturing. The kids listened because he made them want to. Doc's eyes tracked every movement. The angle of Travis's hips when he demonstrated a front kick. The angle of Travis's hips when he demonstrated a front kick. The way he shifted his weight during a block. He wasn't aware he was doing it. It was muscle memory. A reflex buried so deep he couldn't turn it off even if he tried. Zoe was in the second row, trying hard not to look back at her father. She mimicked Travis's movements with the kind of focus Doc recognized. She had her mother's determination. The way she set her jaw when something was difficult. The way she refused to quit. Doc's chest tightened. Halfway through the class, Travis called for a water break. The kids scattered, laughing and chattering. Zoe grabbed her water bottle and looked back at Doc. He gave her a thumbs up. She grinned. That's when the doors opened. 2 women walked in. Identical. Same height, same build, same sharp features. Both wore tailored black blazers and slacks that probably cost more than Doc made in a week. Black belts tied around their waists over the blazers, crisp and new-looking. Behind them, 2 younger people in business casual carried tablets and moved like assistants who'd learned to stay 3 steps back. The room shifted. Travis straightened. A couple of parents looked up from their phones. The women moved through the space like they owned it. Because they did, one of them smiled at Travis. "Don't let us interrupt." Travis nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Ms. Brennan." The twins separated, walking opposite sides of the room, observing. One of them made notes on her assistant's tablet. The other watched the kids with a critical eye, arms crossed. Doc stayed where he was. Still, quiet, trying to be invisible. It didn't work. The twin on his side of the room noticed him sitting alone in the back row. She stopped, looked him up and down. Her expression shifted into something polite but dismissive. She walked over. Her heels clicked on the floor. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was smooth. "Professional. Have the floors been mopped yet?" Doc looked up at her. "Ma'am?" "The floors," she repeated, gesturing vaguely toward the hallway. "We have donors visiting next week. I want to make sure everything's spotless." There was a beat of silence. Doc's jaw tightened, just slightly. "I'm not staff. I'm a parent." The woman blinked. Then she laughed. Light. Practiced. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just assumed." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "It's fine," Doc said quietly. The other twin had noticed the exchange. She walked over, identical smile in place. "Everything all right, Catherine?" "Just a misunderstanding," Catherine said. She looked at Doc again. "My apologies." Doc nodded, said nothing. The second twin extended a hand. "I'm Cassandra Brennan. This is my sister Catherine. We own Titan Tactical Solutions. We fund this program." Doc shook her hand. His grip was firm but brief. "David Harmon." "Pleasure," Cassandra said. Her smile was wider than her sister's, more performative. "Your child's in the class?" "Yes, ma'am. My daughter Zoe." "Wonderful. Well, we're glad to have her." Cassandra's eyes flicked over him once more, cataloging, judging. Then she turned back to her sister. "Let's check the equipment storage." They walked away. Their assistants followed. Doc sat very still. His hands rested on his knees. His breathing was steady, but his eyes tracked the twins until they disappeared through a side door. Across the room, Zoe was staring at him. She'd seen the whole thing. Her face was hard, angry. Doc shook his head slightly. "Let it go." But Zoe didn't look away. Travis called the kids back to the mat. The second half of class went smoothly. More drills, more basics. By the end, Zoe was sweating and smiling. She bowed to Travis with the rest of the class and ran over to Doc. "How'd I do?" "You did great, baby." Travis walked over as the other parents collected their kids. He offered Doc his hand. "Your daughter's got good instincts. She picks things up quick." "Thank you," Doc said. "You run a good class." "Appreciate that." Travis hesitated. Then he lowered his voice. "Hey, I don't know if you're interested, but the Brennans are hosting a fundraiser next month. Demonstrations, speeches, meet the donors. They usually put on a good show. Families are welcome." Zoe's eyes lit up. "Can we go?" Doc looked down at her, then back at Travis. "We'll see." "Dad," Zoe pressed. "Please?" Doc sighed. "We'll see." Wasn't going to cut it, not when she looked at him like that. "Okay," he said. "We'll go." Zoe beamed. Travis smiled. "Great. I'll make sure you're on the list." They walked out into the cool evening air. Zoe chattered the whole way to the car, replaying every drill, every correction, every moment. Doc listened, nodding in the right places. But his mind was elsewhere, on two women in expensive suits who looked at him and saw a janitor. On the way, Catherine's smile hadn't reached her eyes when she apologized. On the corporate logo plastered across every wall like a claim of ownership. He'd spent 10 years trying to stay invisible, trying to be no one, and for the first time in a long time, someone had reminded him exactly why. 3 weeks later, the community center looked like a different place. The main dojo had been transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow over the polished mats. Tables lined the back wall, covered in white cloth and stacked with catering trays. A banner stretched across the front, Titan Tactical Solutions, investing in our heroes. The corporate logo gleamed in navy and gold. Doc and Zoe arrived at 6:30. The room was already packed, donors in business casual, families with kids in karate uniforms, local reporters with cameras, everyone dressed a little nicer than usual, everyone trying to look like they belonged. Doc wore the same khakis and button-down shirt he saved for parent-teacher conferences, clean but worn, the collar frayed just slightly at the edges. Zoe had on her best dress, pale yellow with white flowers. She'd insisted on wearing it even though Doc told her jeans were fine. They found seats in the front row. Doc would have preferred the back, but Zoe pulled him forward, eager and bright-eyed. She wanted to see everything. The Brennan twins worked the room like politicians. Cassandra shook hands with a man in an expensive suit, laughing at something he said. Catherine posed for photos with a group of kids, her smile wide and practiced. Both wore tailored blazers and slacks, their black belts tied perfectly around their waists. They looked powerful, polished, in control. A woman in a headset called for everyone to take their seats. The crowd settled. The lights dimmed slightly. A spotlight hit the center of the mat. Cassandra stepped forward. The room applauded. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said. Her voice carried easily, confident and clear. "At Titan Tactical, we believe in building strength, discipline, and community. Tonight, we want to show you what that looks like." She moved to the center of the mat. Catherine stood at the edge, watching. Cassandra began her kata. Her movements were sharp, technical. Every block, every strike, perfectly measured. She flowed through the sequence with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. The crowd watched in silence, impressed. Doc watched too. His eyes tracked her stance, her balance, the rotation of her hips. He saw the flaws, the slight overextension on the punch, the way her weight shifted a fraction too late. Small things. Things most people wouldn't notice. Things that mattered. Cassandra finished with a sharp ki, her fist stopping inches from an imaginary target. The room erupted in applause. She bowed, smiling, soaking in the attention. Zoe leaned close to her father. "You could do that better," she whispered. Doc smiled, shook his head. "Doesn't matter, baby. But you could." "Let it go," he said softly. Behind them, Catherine Brennan stood greeting a donor. She'd been close enough to hear. She turned, slowly, her eyes locked onto Zoe. "Excuse me?" The room didn't quiet all at once. It was gradual, conversations trailing off, heads turning, people sensing something shift. Zoe froze. Her eyes went wide. Catherine's voice cut through the last whispers of conversation. "You think your dad could do better than a third-degree black belt?" Every eye in the room turned toward them. Doc's jaw tightened. He kept his voice low. She didn't mean anything by it. Her smile was thin, sharp. "No, I'd love to hear this. Your daughter seems to think you're quite the expert." "I'm not," Doc said. "She's 10. She doesn't know what she's talking about." "I do too," Zoe muttered. Her face flushed, embarrassed, defensive. Cassandra had noticed the commotion. She walked over, still riding the high of her demonstration. "This gentleman's daughter seems to think he could outperform you. Cassandra's daughter seems to think he could outperform you." Cassandra's eyebrows lifted. She looked at Doc, really looked at him. Khakis and a worn shirt. Dark skin, graying hair, kind eyes that were trying very hard to avoid hers. A nurse, if she remembered correctly. Nobody important. "Is that right?" Cassandra said. Doc stood. "I apologize. We should probably go." "Why?" Catherine's voice was ice. "If your daughter thinks you're so skilled, maybe you should show us. We're always looking for talented people." The room was silent now. Phones were already out. People recording. Doc's hands hung at his sides. That's not necessary. Scared? Catherine asked. The word landed like a slap. Zoe's hands balled into fists. She'd been her father dismissed. Again. Just like at the first class. Just like always. He was in the Marines, she blurted out. Her voice shook, but she kept going. He taught people how to fight. Real fighting, not just. She stopped, realizing she'd gone too far. Doc closed his eyes. Just for a second, Catherine and Cassandra exchanged a glance. Something passed between them. Recognition, opportunity. The Marines, Catherine repeated. How impressive. Her tone said it wasn't impressive at all. Then you'll have no problem with a friendly demonstration, unless that's too much for you. The challenge hung in the air. Public, recorded. Impossible to walk away from without looking like exactly what they thought he was. A nobody. A man who let his daughter make promises he couldn't keep. Doc looked down at Zoe, saw the tears forming in her eyes, saw the desperate need for him to be more than the quiet man who picked her up from school and made her dinner and never ever stood out. She needed to believe he was someone. Just once. His chest ached. Okay, he said quietly. Catherine's smile widened. Wonderful. Cassandra? Cassandra was already moving toward the mat. This was perfect. A chance to put an overconfident parent in his place in front of donors, in front of cameras. A teaching moment about respecting rank and expertise. Doc removed his jacket, folded it carefully, handed it to Zoe. She took it with trembling hands. Dad, you don't have to. It's okay, baby. He stepped onto the mat in his button-down shirt and khakis. No shoes, no uniform. Just a middle-aged man with tired eyes and hands that hadn't thrown a punch in 10 years. Cassandra stood across from him, black belt cinched tight, confidence radiating from every inch of her posture. The room watched. Waiting. And David Harmon, for the first time in a decade, stopped trying to be invisible. Doc stood barefoot on the mat, still wearing his button-down shirt and khakis. He rolled his shoulders once, stretched his neck. His movements were slow, unhurried. Cassandra Brennan faced him from across the mat, black belt tight around her waist, bare feet planted shoulder-width apart. She smiled, confident, already imagining how this would look on camera. A teaching moment. Respect your instructors. Know your place. She bowed. Doc bowed back. The match began. Cassandra moved first. A sharp jab. Doc shifted his weight, angling his body just enough that the strike passed harmlessly by. No block, no counter. Just space where he'd been a second before. She threw a combination. Jab, cross, front kick, clean technique. Textbook perfect. Doc absorbed it all with minimal movement. His feet barely shifted. His hands rose just enough to deflect, redirect, let the energy slide past. He looked passive, almost weak. The crowd murmured. Whispers rippled through the room. Catherine, watching from the edge of the mat, smirked. This was going exactly as she'd expected. Cassandra pressed harder. Her confidence grew with every unanswered strike. She threw faster combinations, sharper kicks, testing him, pushing him back. Doc gave ground. 1 step, 2 steps. His expression never changed. His breathing stayed even. 30 seconds passed. Cassandra committed to a roundhouse kick, putting her weight behind it. And Doc moved. It happened so fast that half the phones in the room missed it. One moment he was retreating. The next, he'd slipped inside her guard, his hands finding her collar and sleeve with the kind of precision that only comes from 10,000 repetitions. He pivoted. His hips rotated. His weight dropped low and then exploded upward. Cassandra left the ground. For a fraction of a second, she hung in the air, her eyes wide, her body airborne and weightless. Then Doc guided her down, controlling the fall with such perfect timing that she hit the mat hard enough to feel it, but soft enough to be safe. The impact echoed through the silent room. Before Cassandra could process what had happened, Doc had already reset. He stepped back to neutral, hands open, expression unchanged, like nothing had occurred. The crowd sat frozen, mouths open, phones still recording. Catherine's smirk vanished. Cassandra rolled to her feet, her face flushed, embarrassment and anger warring for control. She looked at her sister. Catherine's jaw was tight. My turn, Catherine said. She stepped onto the mat. Faster than her sister, more aggressive. She didn't bow, didn't wait. She came at Doc like she had something to prove. And maybe she did. Her strikes were sharper. Her footwork cleaner. She moved like someone who'd spent years trying to prove she belonged in rooms that didn't want her. Every punch carried weight. Every kick had intent. Doc let her come. He absorbed her offense the same way he'd absorbed Cassandra's. Minimal movement. Perfect economy. His defense looked effortless because it was. He wasn't thinking. He was remembering. Catherine threw a spinning back fist. Doc slipped under it. She followed with a low kick. Doc checked it with his shin, barely lifting his leg. She pressed forward, trying to overwhelm him with volume and speed. A full minute passed. Catherine's breathing grew heavier. Sweat formed on her temples. She'd thrown 30-40 strikes, maybe more. None of them had landed clean. Doc's breathing hadn't changed at all. Then he moved again. A level change so subtle it looked like he'd simply ducked. A sweep so fast the cameras caught only a blur. Catherine's feet left the mat. Doc transitioned smoothly into a submission hold, his arms sliding around her neck, his body weight settling into perfect position. Not enough pressure to choke, just enough to make the threat undeniable. Catherine tapped. Once, twice, frantically slapping the mat with her free hand. Doc released instantly. He stood, stepped back, reset to neutral. Catherine stayed on the mat for a moment, gasping, her face red, her perfect composure shattered. The silence in the room was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the faint buzz of phone cameras still recording. Then, from the back of the room, a man stood. He was older. Gray hair. Dark skin weathered by years in the sun. He wore a VFW cap and a jacket with patches from places most people had only seen on the news. His mouth hung open. His eyes were locked on Doc. "That's Gunny Harmon," he said. His voice cracked. Disbelief and recognition flooding through him all at once. "Oh my God, that's Doc Harmon." 3 other men rose from their seats. Veterans. One of them pulled out his phone, fingers moving fast, searching, confirming. "Camp Pendleton," another muttered. "He was at Pendleton and Quantico. He trained my unit." "I thought he was dead," the first man whispered. The room stayed frozen, but phones were moving now, footage being replayed, sent, shared. Already spreading beyond the 4 walls of the community center. Cassandra and Catherine Brennan, still on the mat, looked at each other. The confident smiles were gone. The corporate polish had cracked. And in its place was something raw and terrible. Horror. Because they understood, all at once, exactly what had just happened. They hadn't challenged a nurse. They'd challenged a ghost. A legend who'd walked away from a life they could never have imagined. And they'd done it in front of cameras, in front of donors, in front of witnesses who now knew his name. The footage was already on a dozen screens, being replayed in slow motion, frame by frame. The surgical precision, the controlled brutality, the effortless destruction of 2 third-degree black belts by a man in khakis who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Doc stood in the center of the mat. His hands hung at his sides. His breathing was still even. He looked like a man who'd just done something he'd sworn never to do again. And in the front row, Zoe sat with her father's jacket clutched in her hands. Tears streamed down her face. Not from sadness, not from fear. From seeing her father, fully and completely, for the very first time in her life. The car ride home was silent. Zoe sat in the passenger seat, her father's jacket folded on her lap. She stared out the window at the passing streetlights, her fingers worrying the fabric. Doc kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, his face unreadable. She had 1,000 questions. He had no answers yet. When they pulled into their building's parking lot, Zoe finally spoke. "Dad, not tonight, baby," Doc said quietly. "Please." She nodded. Her throat was tight. Inside the apartment, Doc told her to get ready for bed. Zoe obeyed without argument. She brushed her teeth, changed into her pajamas. She brushed her teeth, changed into her pajamas, climbed under the covers. But she didn't sleep. She lay in the dark. The way the room had changed when people recognized him, the way he'd looked at her afterward, like he'd broken something he couldn't fix. Doc sat at the kitchen table, still wearing his button-down and khakis. His phone buzzed on the counter. He didn't reach for it. By morning, the world had changed. Doc's phone had been buzzing all night. Texts, Calls, notifications stacking up like a flood. He couldn't hold back. He finally picked it up around 6, squinting at the screen in the early gray light. 43 missed calls. Over 100 text messages. His inbox was full. He opened one at random. A number he didn't recognize. Is this Gunny Harmon, Camp Pendleton, 2010? It's Corporal Davies. Sir, I just saw the video. I can't believe it's you. Doc set the phone down. His hands were steady, but his chest felt tight. He opened his laptop, searched his own name, something he hadn't done in 10 years. The results filled the screen. Video after video. The footage from last night uploaded from a dozen different angles. Close-ups, slow motion, frame-by-frame breakdowns of the throw, the sweep, the submission. The comment sections were exploding, shares in the tens of thousands. And beneath the videos, the stories were starting to surface. A military blog, Gunnery Sergeant David Doc Harmon, the legend who disappeared. A veterans forum, I trained under Doc Harmon at Quantico. This man is the real deal. A news site, viral video shows nurse dismantling corporate CEOs. But who is he? Doc scrolled. His jaw tightened. His breathing stayed even, but his hands gripped the edge of the laptop a little too hard. Someone had found old photos. Doc in dress blues, younger, standing beside other Marines. Doc in the training ring, demonstrating a hold. Doc receiving a commendation, his face serious, his posture perfect, and then, inevitably, the other story, the one he'd hoped would stay buried. Staff Sergeant Malika Harmon, 32, killed in IED blast, March 2015, survived by husband, Gunnery Sergeant David Harmon, and daughter, age 5. Doc closed the laptop. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The VA hospital. His supervisor. He answered. This is David. Doc, it's Karen. I need you to come in. We need to talk. Her voice was careful. Professional, concerned. About what? There's a video going around. People are saying... Doc hesitated. Yes. There was a pause. Okay, we need to discuss this. The administrator wants to meet. There are concerns about publicity, about liability. Can you come in today? I'm off today. I know, but this is important. Doc's jaw tightened. I'll be there. He hung up. In the hallway, a floorboard creaked. Doc turned. Zoe stood in her doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. Are you in trouble? She asked. No, baby, it's fine. She walked into the kitchen, sat at the table, looked at him with those steady eyes that were so much like her mother's. I looked you up, she said. Doc went still. On my tablet, I searched your name. Her voice was small, confused. There are all these articles, all these people talking about you. They're calling you a legend. They're saying you train special forces. They're saying... She stopped, swallowed. Why didn't you ever tell me? Doc sat down across from her. He wanted to reach for her hand, but his own felt too heavy. I didn't know how, he said quietly. But it's you. It's who you were. It's who I was, not who I am. Why not? Doc looked at his daughter. 10 years old, too young to understand and too smart not to ask. Because fighting is what got your mother killed, he said, and I swore I'd never do it again. Zoe's eyes filled with tears. But you did, last night. You fought. I know, for me. Doc's throat tightened. He nodded. Zoe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Everyone's talking about it. It's everywhere. There are people saying you're amazing, and people saying... She stopped, saying what? Mean things. About the hospital. About you being dangerous. Doc's hands curled into fists on the table. Across town, in a glass-walled conference room on the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, Cassandra and Catherine Brennan sat across from 3 people in expensive suits, their PR team, their lawyers, their damage control. The video was playing on the screen behind them. Again, for the 10th time. Cassandra's face was stone. Catherine's hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. This is bad, the PR consultant said. She was young, sharp, dressed in all black. It's not just bad, it's a disaster. You challenged a veteran, a decorated instructor, a widower, and you lost. Publicly. In front of donors, in front of cameras. The optics are... We know the optics, Cassandra snapped. The consultant didn't flinch. Do you? Because right now the internet is painting you as corporate bullies who picked on the wrong guy. The The sympathy is entirely with him. Veterans groups are circulating his service record. People are digging up tributes from his former students. You're trending for all the wrong reasons. Catherine leaned forward. Her voice was ice. So what do we do? The lawyer spoke up. A man in his 50s with silver hair and a voice like gravel. We have options. We can issue an apology, frame it as a misunderstanding, donate to veterans' charities, distance yourselves from the narrative. Or, Cassandra said, the lawyer's expression didn't change. Or we go on offense, question his mental stability, raise concerns about his behavior, suggest that his actions were inappropriate, aggressive, that he put people at risk. Catherine and Cassandra looked at each other. The PR consultant shook her head. That's a mistake. It'll backfire. The public loves an underdog story. You can't win this by attacking him. We're not asking what the public loves, Catherine said coldly. We're asking what protects our company. The room went quiet. Cassandra leaned back in her chair. Do it. Draft the statement. Question his fitness. Imply liability. Make it sound like we're concerned for public safety. The consultant stood. This is a mistake. Your objection is noted, Catherine said. Now do your job. 48 hours after the sparring match, Titan Tactical Solutions released an official statement. Doc read it on his phone, standing in his kitchen while Zoe ate breakfast at the table. The words were careful. Legal. Designed to wound without leaving fingerprints. We are deeply concerned by the actions of an individual who engaged in aggressive and inappropriate physical contact during a private event. While we respect all who have served, we believe that such behavior raises serious questions about judgment and mental fitness. The safety of our community is our top priority. Doc's jaw locked. His fingers tightened around the phone. The screen cracked under the pressure. Zoe looked up. Dad? He set the phone down carefully, forced his hands to unclench. But the damage was done. The battle lines were drawn. And for the first time in 10 years, David Harmon felt the old anger stirring beneath the carefully maintained calm. The letter arrived at the VA hospital on Monday morning. Doc was restocking supplies in the cardiac wing when his supervisor found him. Karen was in her 50s, a former Army medic with kind eyes and no patience for bureaucracy. She held a manila folder like it weighed 10 pounds. Doc, my office now. He followed her down the hallway, past patients and nurses who didn't look up. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. His sneakers squeaked on the linoleum. Karen closed the door behind them, sat down, opened the folder. Titan Tactical Solutions sent this to the hospital administrator, she said. Their legal team. It's a formal complaint. Doc stood in front of her desk, hands at his sides. Karen read from the letter. Her voice was flat. Professional. They're raising concerns about your behavior at a recent event. They're implying liability issues, suggesting that your actions were aggressive and inappropriate. They're questioning whether you're fit to work in a patient care environment. Doc's jaw tightened. He said nothing. They copied the hospital's legal department, the board, the union. This isn't informal. Karen looked up at him. Doc, I've worked with you for 8 years. I know you. But the administrator is spooked. He wants you on administrative leave while we review this. How long? A week, maybe 2, until legal clears it. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, Karen said quietly. But that video is everywhere. And these people have government contracts. They have lawyers. They know how to make noise. She closed the folder. I'm sorry, Doc. I fought this, but I lost. Doc nodded once. Turned to Doc, Karen said. For what it's worth. That video. You were protecting yourself. Anyone with eyes can see that. He looked back at her. But not everyone has eyes, she added. Some people just have lawyers. Doc left the hospital that afternoon with his belongings in a canvas bag. He didn't say goodbye to anyone, just walked out into the cold March air and drove home. The call from Zoe's school came the next day. The principal's voice was apologetic but firm. There had been a complaint from a legal firm representing Titan Tactical Solutions, concerns about safety, questions about whether Mr. Harmon's presence at school events was appropriate given his history. Doc listened in silence. We're not banning you from the premises, the principal clarified. But we're asking that you limit your involvement in school activities until this is resolved. No field trips, no volunteer events. We'll need to discuss any future participation. Understood, Doc said. He hung up. That afternoon, Zoe came home from school with red eyes. She dropped her backpack by the door and went straight to her room without speaking. Doc followed her, stood in her doorway. What happened? Zoe sat on her bed, staring at her hands. I heard Miss Patterson and Mr. Kim talking. In the hallway, they didn't see me. Doc waited. They said you were violent. They said maybe I should talk to the counselor about feeling safe at home. Her voice cracked. I ran before they saw me. Doc's hands curled into fists. He forced them to relax. I'm sorry, baby. Why are they doing this? Zoe whispered. Because they can. By Thursday, the youth karate program had been suspended. An email went out to all parents. Effective immediately. Titan Tactical Solutions was pulling funding due to safety concerns. Classes were canceled until further notice. The community center would be in touch about alternative programming. Doc's phone lit up with messages from confused parents. Angry parents. Parents who'd seen the video and understood exactly what was happening. But there was nothing they could do. Friday evening, Travis showed up at Doc's door. The young instructor looked tired, conflicted. He wouldn't meet Doc's eyes. I wanted you to hear it from me, Travis said. The program's done, at least while Titan Tactical's involved. And they own the facility, the mats, the equipment, all of it. Doc nodded. I believe you, man, Travis added quickly. What happened at that fundraiser? That was self-defense. Anyone who knows anything about martial arts can see that. But I can't say that publicly. If I speak up, I lose my job. And I've got a kid on the way. I can't. He stopped. Dot looked down. I'm sorry. I understand, Doc said. Travis left. Doc closed the door, stood in the entryway of his small apartment, the walls pressing in from all sides. A week ago, he'd been invisible, anonymous, safe. Now he was losing everything, and the people with the power to stop it were the same ones who'd started it. That night, Doc tried to explain it to Zoe, tried to help her understand why fighting back wouldn't work, why sometimes you had to let powerful people win because the cost of resisting was too high. She sat at the kitchen table, picking at her dinner, not eating, not looking at him. Why won't you fight back? She asked. Because it won't help. How do you know? Because I've seen what fighting does. Doc's voice was quiet. Careful. It destroys things. It takes people away. Your mother. Don't, Zoe said. Doc stopped. Don't blame Mom. Zoe's eyes were wet. Angry. Mom died because of a bomb, not because she knew how to fight. She died protecting people. That's what you said. I did. So why won't you protect yourself? Because fighting is what got your mother killed, Doc said. The words came out harder than he meant them to. She was there because of the job, because we chose that life. And I swore when she died that I'd never. But doing nothing is killing you, Zoe said. Her voice broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You think I don't see it. You think I'm too little to understand. They're hurting you, and you're just letting them. Doc had no answer. Zoe stood, walked to her room, closed the door. Doc sat alone in the kitchen. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the ticking of the wall clock. The framed photo of Malika sat on the counter, watching him the way she always did. Smiling in her dress blues, forever 32, forever looking at him like he could do anything. He stared at the photo until the light outside faded to black. The weight of his daughter's questions sat on his chest like a stone he couldn't move, and for the first time in 10 years, David Harmon wasn't sure that staying silent was the same thing as staying safe. 2 days later, Doc sat alone in his apartment and tried to remember what normal felt like. Zoe was staying with Mrs. Patterson next door. A retired teacher, kind eyes, a grandmother who'd helped them through the worst of it when Malika died. Doc had told her he needed a few days to sort things out. Mrs. Patterson had looked at him with a kind of sympathy that made his chest hurt, then taken Zoe's hand and promised hot chocolate and board games. The apartment was too quiet without her. Doc hadn't left in 48 hours, hadn't showered, hadn't shaved. He sat at the kitchen table in sweatpants and an old Marine Corps t-shirt, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed every few minutes. He didn't answer. The messages piled up. Reporters, veterans he hadn't spoken to in years. Strangers offering support or asking for interviews or telling him to lawyer up. He ignored all of it. Outside, the March wind rattled the windows. The radiator clanked. The neighbors upstairs argued about something Doc couldn't quite hear. Then someone knocked him again. Louder, more insistent. "I know you're in there, Gunny," a voice called through the door. "Open up." Doc stood slowly, walked to the door, looked through the peephole. The gray-haired man from the fundraiser stood in the hallway, VFW cap, weathered dark skin, eyes that had seen things most people only read about. Doc opened the door. "Sergeant Major Bowen," the man said. "But you can call me Ray. We served together. Camp Pendleton, 2008. I was supply. You probably don't remember." Doc stepped aside. Ray walked in like he'd been invited. "I remember," Doc said quietly. Ray looked around the apartment, took in the empty beer bottles on the counter, the unwashed dishes, the general stillness of a place where someone had stopped trying. He sat down at the kitchen table without asking. "You look like hell, Gunny." Doc closed the door, leaned against it. "What do you want?" "To tell you the truth." Ray folded his hands on the table. "The veteran community is rallying. You might not be answering your phone, but people are talking. People are talking. People remember you, and they're pissed." "That doesn't help me." "Donations are pouring in," Ray continued. "Legal defense fund. Over $50,000 in 2 days. A retired General Morgan, you know him, offered to testify publicly about your character. People are writing letters, calling their representatives. This isn't going away, Doc. You're not alone in this." Doc's jaw tightened. "I am alone. I lost my job. My daughter's school thinks I'm dangerous. The karate program shut down. I did this to myself. You defended yourself. I broke a vow." Ray was quiet for a moment. The radiator clanked again. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. "What vow?" Ray asked. Doc looked at him. At this man who'd shown up uninvited and refused to leave. "When Malika died, I swore I'd never fight again," Doc said. "I swore I'd only use my hands to heal, to help. And I kept that promise for 10 years, until I didn't. You had no choice. I always had a choice." Ray leaned back in his chair, studied Doc with the kind of patience that came from decades of dealing with stubborn Marines. "There's a journalist," Ray said. "Local station. Her name's Amanda Chen. She wants to tell your side of the story. No ambush, no spin. Just you, talking about who you are and what happened. She's good people. I know her from the VFW." Doc shook his head. "That won't help." "It might. Or it might make things worse." "Things are already worse, Gunny." Ray's voice was gentle but firm. "You're sitting here in the dark, suspended from your job, separated from your daughter, letting people who don't know you decide who you are. Is that what Malika would want?" Doc's hands curled into fists. "Don't. What would she say if she saw you now?" "She's not here to say anything." "Then say it for her." The words hung in the air between them. Heavy, unavoidable. Doc's throat tightened. He looked away. Ray stood, pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and set it on the table. "Amanda Chen, her number's on there. Think about it." He walked to the door, then stopped. "You trained me, Gunny 278 Tot. 3-day course on close quarters combat. You probably ran 100 of those. But I remember what you said. You said the strongest thing a fighter can do is know when to stand down. But you also said there's a difference between standing down and giving up." Ray left. The door clicked shut behind him. Doc stood in the middle of his empty apartment, staring at the business card on the table. After a long time, he walked to his bedroom, stood in front of the closet. The footlocker sat in the back corner where it always did, covered in a thin layer of dust. He pulled it out, set it on the bed. The lock was stiff from years of not being touched. He worked it open. Inside, his dress blues, folded perfectly, the creases still sharp. Medals in a small wooden box. Photographs of men and women he'd served with. Some dead now, some scattered across the country living lives he'd never know about. And at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, a folded American flag. Malika's flag. Doc lifted it carefully. Beneath it was an envelope, his name written in her handwriting. He'd read it once, the week after she died, and then put it away because the words had been too much to carry. He opened it now. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded. Her handwriting was precise, clear, the letters formed with the same discipline she brought to everything. "David," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I won't be there to grow old with you. I'm sorry I won't see Zoe graduate or get married or become whatever amazing thing she's going to become. I'm sorry you're carrying this grief alone, but I need you to know something. You are the strongest man I've ever known. Not because of what you can do with your hands, not because of your rank or your reputation. You're strong because you choose to be good. Even when it's hard, even when it hurts, don't lose that. Don't let this break you. Zoe needs you. The world needs you. And David, when the time comes that you have to stand up for something, don't be afraid. I'll be with you, always. I love you. Malika. Doc read it twice. Then a third time. His hands trembled, his vision blurred. He sat on the edge of the bed, the letter pressed against his chest, and let 10 years of held breath finally escape. The sun was setting outside when he finally stood. He walked to the kitchen, picked up his phone, found the business card Ray had left. He dialed the number. A woman answered on the second ring. Amanda Chen. "This is David Harmon," Doc said. His voice was steady. "Quiet. I'd like to tell my story." The quiet. "I'd like to tell my story." The news studio was smaller than Doc expected. A desk, 2 chairs, a camera on a tripod with a young man behind it adjusting settings. Soft lights that made the cramped space feel warmer than it was. Amanda Chen met him at the door. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that saw too much but didn't judge. "Mr. Harmon, thank you for coming." "David," he said, "or Doc." She smiled, led him to the chair, clipped a microphone to his collar. The technician counted down. The technician counted down. 3, 2, 1. And Doc began to talk. He told her about meeting Malika in boot camp, how she could do more pull-ups than half the men, how she'd challenged him to a sparring match on their 3rd date, how they'd served together, deployed together, built a life in the narrow spaces between danger and duty. He told her about his years as an instructor, training Marines, teaching them to fight and to survive, and sometimes, when it mattered most, to walk away. He told her about the IED, the call he'd gotten at Camp Pendleton while he was running a training session, the way time had stopped and restarted and never quite moved the same way again. "I made a vow," Doc said. His voice was quiet, steady. "After she died, I swore I'd only use my hands to heal, to help, never to harm." "And you kept that vow for 10 years, Amanda said. "Yes, until the fundraiser." Doc nodded. "They put me in a position where I had no choice, and my daughter was watching. She needed to see that I wouldn't just let them humiliate us." "Do you regret stepping onto that mat?" Doc paused. The studio was silent except for the faint hum of equipment. "No," he said. "I regret waiting so long to show my daughter who I really am." The interview lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, Amanda shook his hand. "This will air in 2 days," she said. "I think it's going to matter." Doc drove home, picked up Zoe from Mrs. Patterson's, made dinner, tried not to think about what would happen when the world saw him talk about Malika, about the vow, about the 10 years he'd spent trying to be someone he wasn't. The interview aired on a Tuesday evening. Doc and Zoe watched it together on the couch. Zoe sat close to him, her shoulder pressed against his arm. When the segment showed footage of the sparring match, she looked away. When it showed Doc talking about her mother, tears slid down her face. The broadcast ended. Doc turned off the TV. Neither of them spoke. Then Doc's phone buzzed, and buzzed again, and didn't stop. By morning, the response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from veterans, military families, strangers who'd never served but understood what it meant to lose someone and keep going. News outlets picked up the story. Veterans groups shared it. A retired Marine general posted a video tribute speaking directly to the camera about Doc's character, his service, his integrity. The narrative shifted. It wasn't about a nurse who got into a fight anymore. It was about a decorated veteran who'd been publicly humiliated and defended himself with restraint. It was about corporate bullies weaponizing their power against a single father. It was about a man who'd sacrificed everything and asked for nothing. The Brennan twins' carefully constructed image crumbled faster than they could control. Titan Tactical's PR crisis deepened. 3 major clients issued statements distancing themselves from the company. 2 government contracts were put under review. The company's stock price dropped. Social media turned on them with the kind of fury that comes when people finally see through a polished surface to the hollowness beneath. Cassandra and Catherine held emergency meetings, hired crisis consultants, drafted apologies that their lawyers told them not to send. But they didn't apologize. They doubled down. On Thursday afternoon, Doc got a call from Zoe's school. The principal's voice was tight, apologetic, terrified. Titan Tactical's legal team had escalated. They were threatening to sue the school district unless Doc was formally banned from all school property. The principal had consulted with the district's lawyers. The risk was too high. The decision had been made. Doc hung up, stared at the wall. Felt something inside him that had been bending for 2 weeks finally reach its breaking point. When Zoe came home that afternoon, she was holding an envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Read it. Her face went pale. "Dad," she whispered, "they're saying you can't come to school anymore. You can't come to my concerts or my science fair or anything. They're saying it's for safety." Doc took the letter. "Read it." The words were careful. "Legal." Doc took the letter. "Legal." Cowardly. He set it down on the table. Her eyes were red. Her voice was small and broken. "Why won't you fight for yourself?" "I am fighting," Doc said. "No, you're not. You're just letting them win." "Zoe, if you won't fight for yourself," she said, her voice rising, cracking, "will you at least fight for the truth?" The question hung in the air. Doc looked at his daughter. 10 years old, strong like her mother, brave in ways he'd forgotten how to be. She was asking him to do what Malika would have done, what Malika had always done. Stand up, speak out. Stand up, speak out. Refused to be silenced by people who valued power more than integrity. Hiding hadn't protected them. Silence hadn't kept them safe. It had only made him smaller. And it had taught Zoe that the right thing to do when powerful people hurt you was to disappear. That wasn't the lesson Malika would have wanted him to teach. Doc pulled out his phone, searched for Amanda Chen's number but pressed call. She answered on the first ring. "David? I want to do another interview," Doc said. "And this time, I want to talk about what they're doing. All of it. The hospital, the school, the threats. I want to tell the truth. The school, the threats. I want to tell the truth." She was watching him with those steady eyes, waiting to see what kind of man her father really was. "Yes," Doc said. "I'm sure." Amanda was quiet for a moment. "I'll set it up tomorrow morning. And David, this is the right call." Doc hung up, sat down beside his daughter, put his arm around her. "I'm sorry I waited so long," he said quietly. Zoe leaned into him. "It's okay. You're doing it now." And for the first time in 10 years, David Harmon understood that honoring Malika's memory didn't mean hiding from who he'd been. It meant refusing to let the world forget what she'd stood for. 6 months later, Doc stood in the doorway of a building he'd never imagined would exist. The dojo was small. One room with hardwood floors that still smelled like fresh varnish, wide windows that let in the late afternoon sunlight, warm and golden. The walls were painted a soft cream. Simple, clean, enough. Above the door, a wooden sign read, "Malika's Place, free martial arts for military families." Doc ran his hand along the doorframe. His fingers traced the letters. He'd hung that sign himself 2 weeks ago, standing on a ladder while Zoe held it steady from below, telling him when it was level. Behind him, 20 kids sat in neat rows on the mat, wide-eyed, eager, nervous. Their ages ranged from 6 to 14. Most wore hand-me-down karate uniforms. A few wore gym clothes. It didn't matter. They were here. That was enough. Doc turned to face them. His daughter stood beside him. Zoe was 11 now, taller than she'd been 6 months ago, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a white uniform with a yellow belt tied carefully around her waist. Assistant instructor. She stood straight, shoulders back, trying not to smile too wide. On the wall behind them hung a large photograph in a simple black frame, Malika in her dress blues, smiling. The way she'd looked the day she made staff sergeant, young, strong, alive. Doc bowed to the photograph. Zoe bowed beside him. The kids followed, awkward but sincere. Then Doc turned to the class and bowed again, lower this time. A sign of respect. The kids bowed back. "My name is David Harmon," Doc said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "You can call me Mr. Harmon or Sensei. This is my daughter Zoe. She'll be helping me teach." A small boy in the front row raised his hand. Are you the guy from the video? Doc smiled. Yes. That was so cool, the boy whispered. It was necessary. There's a difference. He walked slowly along the front row, making eye contact with each child. This dojo is named after my wife. Her name was Malika. She was a Marine. She believed that martial arts isn't about fighting. It's about discipline, respect, protecting people who can't protect themselves. The kids listened. No one moved. We're going to train hard here, Doc continued. But we're also going to learn why we train. You'll learn how to defend yourselves. But more importantly, you'll learn when not to fight. You'll learn how to walk away, how to de-escalate, how to be strong enough to choose peace. He stopped in the center of the room. Zoe stood beside him, watching the kids with the same careful attention her father had taught her. Today is our first class, Doc said. Let's begin. They started with basics, stances, balance, how to make a proper fist without breaking your own thumb. Doc moved through the room, correcting posture with a gentle hand, offering praise when a kid got it right. His voice was patient, calm, present. Zoe demonstrated each technique first. She moved with the kind of precision that came from hours of practice with her father in their small apartment, learning not just the motions but the principles behind them. The hour passed quickly. By the end, the kids were sweating and smiling, exhausted but proud. Doc called them back to their rows. They sat, breathing hard, faces bright. You did well today, Doc said. Next class is Tuesday. Same time. Bring water. Bring focus. Bring respect. He paused, looked at each of them. And remember, the strongest thing you can do is know when to stand and for whom. The kids bowed. Doc and Zoe bowed back. Parents filtered in, collecting their children. A few of them stopped to thank Doc. One mother, a veteran herself, shook his hand and said, "This is exactly what we needed." Doc nodded. "It's what I needed too." When the last family left, the dojo was quiet. Sunlight slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. Doc and Zoe stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the gentle silence of a space that had been filled with purpose. Zoe looked up at him. "How do you feel?" "Tired," Doc said. He smiled. "Good tired. Mom would be proud," Zoe whispered. Doc's throat tightened. He looked at the photograph on the wall, Malika's smile, her eyes. The uniform she'd worn with such pride. For 10 years, he carried the weight of her loss like a stone he couldn't put down. He believed that hiding his strength was the only way to honor her memory. That staying small kept him safe. That silence was the same as peace. He'd been wrong. Malika hadn't loved him because he was quiet. She'd loved him because he was quiet. She'd loved him because he was strong enough to be gentle, brave enough to teach. And she would have wanted him to teach that to their daughter. "Yeah," Doc said quietly. "I think she would be." He put his arm around Zoe's shoulders. She leaned into him. They turned off the lights, locked the door, walked out into the warm September evening. The south side stretched out around them. Familiar streets. Corner stores with signs in English and Spanish and Arabic, neighbors sitting on stoops, talking and laughing as the day cooled. Kids playing basketball in a fenced-in court, the sound of the ball echoing off brick walls. This was home. It always had been. Doc and Zoe walked side by side, her hand in his, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. They passed the corner store where Mr. Hassan waved from behind the counter, past the park where Zoe used to play when she was small, past the building where Mrs. Patterson still lived, the woman who'd taken care of Zoe when Doc couldn't take care of himself. Everything had changed, and nothing had tightened. Tactical Solutions had collapsed under the weight of its own cruelty. Catherine Brennan resigned 3 months ago. Cassandra tried to salvage what was left, but eventually stepped down. The company lost most of its contracts and faced multiple lawsuits from former employees and partners who'd finally found the courage to speak. The youth karate program had reopened under new management, funded entirely by the veteran community. Travis was still the head instructor. He'd called Doc last month to apologize. Doc told them there was nothing to apologize for. The VA had reinstated Doc with a formal apology and an offer to return full-time. Doc chose part-time instead. 3 days a week. The rest of his time belonged to the dojo, to Zoe, to the life he was finally learning how to live. They reached their building, climbed the stairs, unlocked the door to their small apartment, Inside, the framed photograph of Malika still sat on the kitchen counter, but it didn't hurt to look at it anymore. It reminded Doc of who she was, who he'd been, who he could still become. Zoe grabbed a snack from the fridge, started telling Doc about a technique she wanted to try next class. Her voice was bright, excited, unguarded. Doc listened, nodding, offering suggestions, feeling something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the silence of hiding, but the deep earned peace that comes from standing for something that matters, even when it costs you everything. True guardianship, Doc finally understood, was not hiding your strength. It was knowing when to stand, and for whom. And as he looked at his daughter, alive and whole and unafraid, Doc knew he'd made the right choice. They were home, both of them, and they always would be.